From now on, whenever you hear these horns, just know you are now entering the blackness.
A conversation started when Dr. Brittney Cooper jumped in, and she published a piece called "It's Not About You, White Liberals: Why Attacks on Radical People of Color Are So Misguided."
Yeah.
I laugh because it's like when you read that, you just go, "Ah, damn!" You know, people hurt. You know, people. Because I imagine that people just saw that and just got mad immediately, Imani.
Oh yeah.
Like, they didn't even read it yet. They were just like, "Come on, man! Why are you being so divisive? Why are you being so divisive, man?" And because I thought the article was so interesting, we specifically got Dr. Brittney Cooper to come on the show. Dr. Cooper, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's greatly appreciated. Dr. Brittney Cooper is a professor of women's and gender studies at Rutgers University and Africana studies, and apparently studies on getting in white liberals' fifis. Ma'am,
Yeah.
what got you to write this?
Well, I just saw some really problematic conversations happening both offline and online. And so the particular catalyst was Michelle Goldberg's piece at The Nation, where she basically tried to come for people of color by accusing us of engaging in this kind of divisive narrative of radical, what she called radical anti-liberalism, or this idea that people who are more to the left of her are going to ruin our ability to maintain control of the House and the Senate in the midterm elections. And I just thought that was ludicrous. I thought it was misguided. I thought that it was attempting to blame people of color for all the ways in which folks on the just kind of more traditionally liberal left, meaning people who are in government and who believe in policy solutions as the solutions for inequality, that those folks have largely dropped the ball. And so blaming people of color on Twitter for talking about that just seemed to me kind of grimy, frankly, and deeply short-sighted and misguided. And so I thought that I should call her out for it. So I did.
But Dr. Cooper, I believe that you were used as a cudgel in that piece in The Nation.
I was. And so it's been a tough kind of thing. So when I chose to do to interview with Michelle Goldberg for The Nation piece, it was because I too have had some issues with Black feminists and women of color feminists on Twitter. And that goes back to this long-standing thing about the Fem Future report that was put out by Vanessa Valenti and Courtney Martin last spring, this time last spring. And I supported that report, not because I think that that those two are necessarily always right. I don't know and had not experienced a lot of the backstory and history between them and other Black feminists on Twitter. But basically, I thought that they were attempting to at least put some policy prescriptions in place and do some actual kinds of organizing that I thought would help those of us who do a lot of this online labor for free. And so that was the basis of my support. And that got me dragged on Twitter by a whole lot of folks that I generally think politically that I agree with on many levels. And so I wanted to sort of call that out and say, look, this is divisive. This makes us look reactionary. This makes us look short-sighted. And what are our politics as Black feminists about, and how are we going to engage each other? So we don't have to agree, but we should be able to agree that what we're not going to do is drag each other, be destructive, call each other names and things like that. That was my sort of very limited investment in talking with Michelle. But what I was not interested in doing is sort of indicting people of color for calling out the BS that happens online. I think that that's totally powerful. I think it's appropriate. I'm here for it. But I want us to be able to move conversations forward in the places where we need to, and holding those things together is a little bit tough to do.
And it's interesting that that's what happened to you. Like you said, you got dragged through Twitter, and so and then you come out with this article, which obviously a lot of folks agree with, and you brought out some points that I feel like I have thought in the past. I might not have jumped on Twitter to throw it out there because I feel as if when having certain types of critiques on Twitter will sometimes be more problematic because they end up becoming used, like I said, as a cudgel against people that actually I agree with their overall point. I might not agree with how they went about making the argument, but in the end, I still agree with them. But there was a quote here in your piece here that I have found myself become almost like a mantra for me. So he says, More to the point, the demand to people to be reasonable is a disingenuous demand. Black folks have been reasoning with white people forever. Racism is unreasonable, and that means reason has limited currency in the fight against it. Black folks understand, just like white folks do, that reason should be wielded as a tactic, not adhered to as a rule. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I hate that stuff where people are like, just be reasonable. It's like, when have we ever not been being reasonable, right? And where has that gotten us? And so, let's get crunk sometimes, right? This sort of attempt to tell us, like, well, if you would say it to me more nicely, then I would listen to you. Is this kind of passive aggressive white cultural silencing tactic, and I am specifically not here for that.
And you know what? And at the moment, we make a lot of jokes here within TWiB Nation about the idea of reasonable Negro. Like I've fashioned myself as reasonable Negro, and then as of late, folks have been especially if you go by right wing media, I am a raging bigot, racist, part of the proud new era of black racists who want nothing more than the destruction of white folks. And I was catching nothing but flack from folks on the left for being too reasonable. And then all of a sudden I realized that, you know what, apparently it doesn't matter what I say because you hear anger even if I explain something very, very calmly. So then what if I just tell you flat out, this is stupid, you're being racist. Now I'm stopping the conversation, Imani.
Well, if I may jump in for a minute, I think we're talking about two different things. I think we're talking about the ways in which black activists, black feminists relate to each other. And so that's an intra-racial conversation.
Well, that's one part. But
and then we're also talking about the ways in which how we express ourselves politically is viewed by white liberals and white conservatives as being too much, as being extra, as being too crunk. And so I think my problem with Michelle Goldberg's article was that she took a conversation that Dr. Cooper, you were trying to have about intra-racial political activism and then expanded it and pushed it into something that I don't think you had intended it to be pushed to.
That's right. That's right. And this is always the challenge, right? How do you have these sort of intra conversations in the mainstream? And it's so interesting, right? Because Twitter is very, we do have a lot of intra-racial, intra-community conversations that other people can listen into and then have their input on, even though their input is not welcome and no one really cares what they think or have to say. And this, and so this is kind of what happened with the Nation piece, and to be honest with y'all, I'm still sort of thinking through the politics of that, whether I should have done that interview, whether that was the right way to do it. I get that this is a sort of murky territory, but part of what's at stake here, right, is that one of the things that bothers me about white liberal folks in these conversations is that they keep making it about them, about their feelings, about whether or not they're good people. And it's like, well, we don't know you, so it's not about what kind of person you are. The only thing I know about you is what you do, what you support, and how that affects my material reality. And that's a set of policy conversations, less than it is a conversation about, whether you treat pets nice and whether you're friendly to your neighbor's children, like that. I don't know. And so for me, that is a totally separate kind of conversation than, as you say, Imani, the kind of engagement that black feminists have to have with each other, because there's a way in which we know that the world is violent. And so interpersonal interaction does have to be part of our politics of engagement with each other. Those of us who do women of color feminisms, particularly in online spaces where we too don't always know each other personally. Right. And so we've got to figure that out. Right. But I'm not so sure that I made the right choice in saying that the way to figure that out was to kind of interview with somebody who is clearly not an ally in that struggle. And so I'm still kind of working that out.
I just wondered, did you have a sense that because I got the sense that you didn't necessarily know that that's where she was going to go with the piece. Like I saw that there were two pieces within that piece. There was the one talking about, divisiveness and feminism. And then there was another section that was just bash Mickey Kendall, which I thought, and I couldn't imagine you signing on for that. But I do agree that there is a conversation to be had among black feminists, among people who are people of color on Twitter and digital spaces about how it is we engage with each other and with white people. And I don't think that that's sort of where Michelle Goldberg ended up going.
Yeah, I thought that maybe what she could do is sort of that she was going to write a piece that attempted to put all of these things kind of in a broader context, because I think many communities are talking about Twitter engagements. And I think that black communities have something to say about that, and that there is a broader set of narratives to be had. But in the end, it just was an attack. And I did communicate to Michelle that I thought that the way she set it up was sort of unfairly sympathetic, right, to the Fem Future folks, that it was unfairly attacking Black feminists, Mickey Kendall included. I did sort of share with her some of my reservations about it. But let me also be honest and say, because I am Professor Crunk for a reason. I am transparent. I was real upset, right? I was very upset with Black feminists in that moment because of the ways that I have been treated on Twitter, because I've been called names. I mean, people just straight up called me out my name, called me mammy, called me the B word, said that I was basically mammying for white folks, right? Like, that was pretty tough to hear, given kind of what I know my politics to be. So I probably didn't approach it with much, with a whole lot of care. And so again, part of that too is about this question of emotional labor, right? And how do we sort of deal with each other in care? Because the reality is our feelings are implicated in some of this stuff. And so I get, the thing about social media is it allows you to respond when you feel shit, right? Even though sometimes that's not the best moment to do it and you have to walk away. Again, I'm sort of thinking through it, because I think that the thing that I love about Black women and our engagements is that we're always sort of real honest with each other and we don't pull any punches. And so I think I came from that spirit, but we got to be strategic too. So I'm like figuring it out. And, but that aside, like what is not appropriate is this sort of narrative that Black folks and more recently Sui Park and Asian American folks on Twitter are being divisive on the left. What radicalism has always done is push the left to have some integrity, to push liberals to have some integrity in terms of their policy making. And in a world where things are being consistently dragged to the right, then the idea that we don't need anybody on the radical left pulling the left back to a place that is decidedly left in terms of policy making is completely absurd. And so radicals have an absolute role to play in making sure that the left has some kind of integrity in terms of its politics.
So now, you make an interesting point, and you and Imani, about the concept of the inside of the race conversation and outside. And the question becomes then, how do you even go about it? Because I know personally, there are times where I will not throw anything out there. I won't make a critique, not because I don't think it, not because I don't think it might need to be said, but because I am aware of the fact that if I say it, then all of a sudden I'm used as a weapon against everyone else. And I don't want that to happen. Whether or not I believe that it needs to be done better or not is like it doesn't even matter, because I don't is my critique is my critique good enough or not even good enough, or I guess like is it worth it for me to point out, hey, this might not be the best way to go about it, and then all of a sudden be used in a bunch of think pieces saying, and Elon James White said. You know what I mean? Because I caught flack for something that I said that was actually completely and wildly misquoted in that piece when they first started talking about Black Twitter. And of course, folks were like, "Well, Elon called Black Twitter racist." I was like, "Whoa, wait, whoa, what?" That's right. And so, how do you have that conversation? How do you have the conversation reasonably in order for us to have better communication without it then being turned against the same group that we're trying to make better?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that you hit it right on the head, right? Which is that folks are always looking for somebody to co-opt. And look, and then it looks like we're saying to each other, just be reasonable, right? Just act right, And so, but I think that there's a way in which Black folks can sort of say that interculturally to each other, like, what you doing? Like, what now? That does not always translate for other folks who are sort of listening from the outside. So it's unclear to me, right, how we have those conversations. But although I do think one sort of solution to this is something pretty basic, which is like, we could just pull it offline and like message people and be like, can I have your phone number? And let's take it analog and let me call you up and see, and talk to you, or let me email you in the back channels and let's have a conversation. But it's so funny because we don't actually think about that kind of engagement with each other anymore. We think about, always the sort of public face. And the reality is that everything does not have to have a public face. And that's a truth we would do well to sort of reclaim, because putting all of our stuff on Front Street all the time is gonna impede us if we don't start sort of being more thoughtful about that.
And so then the question becomes, Imani, and please, if you know something about how to deal with this, I've had folks say flat out that if you did it in public, then my critique of you should be in public. You know what I mean? Like I've heard that specifically as an answer as to why being able to make those type of critiques directly at you online, and then at that same time not really taking into consideration how our words are mattering. Because I believe part of the conversation around this morning with Melissa Harris Perry, and I've actually seen people say it before, and a prime example is the Jamila Lemieux situation with the RNC, is that there was a time where our conversations weren't being so heavily monitored. There was like, if you go back to 2009 Twitter, there was all types of dumb stuff happening. That's when I became friends with Melissa Harris Perry. That's when we would sit there. There was a thing we used to do. It was called Talk Shit Thursdays. All right, with folks like Blair Kelly, which it could never happen now. Never happen, because so many people are listening and waiting for, God forbid, we say something that can be used against either the group or just the people themselves. So then, how do we, like, it's like you want to pull things on the side offline, but at the same time you like if something goes wrong, then you want to correct it in public, but then. Like, you can't, with how everything is being listened to, so it becomes this perfect storm of just ridiculousness, and we find ourselves stuck for no reason, really. Like, the only reason why is because other people want to somehow attack us. And that's what kind of stifles the whole conversation.
Yeah, they want to attack us. They want to use our words against us, but they also want to use us to mine for content. So that they can publish their articles on BuzzFeed or Salon or wherever. What did Black Twitter have to say about XYZ? The perfect example is Steve Fox, when she organized people talking about what they were wearing when they were sexually assaulted. I think we're in an age where Twitter matters. And so you're right. We can't have certain conversations on Twitter. I mean, for example, I wanted to, when we were talking about that woman who called us the proud new era of Black racists, I looked her up. I found her Twitter handle and I looked at her mentions and there was just nothing. There's nothing in her mentions. And I knew that if I were to tweet that article, it would suddenly be filled up with people going at her, being like, how dare you, blah, 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 blah. And then she'd be able to turn around and use that to say, oh, well, look how mean the Black people are. And you see that on the left, too, there was a woman who tried to start that hashtag, Stop Blaming Women, We Need Unity. She'd written that article like 2 weeks before the firestorm lit up on Twitter. And so it was like, and I sort of, in retrospect, I regret calling attention to it, because had I and other people not called attention to it, it probably would have just gone, like, there would have been no attention paid to it. But then she was able to turn around and say, oh, look, the Black people are being mean again.
But she deserved to be dragged. Like, sometimes, I mean, you're just asking for it, because she tweeted me, I mentioned the hashtag and then the Salon piece and called her a poor soul. And she was like, why didn't you say my name? And it's like, because girl, this is not Destiny's Child. And so we're not doing that. I'm not giving you any, what are you talking about? And so sometimes people are asking for it.
Yeah. It's interesting, and so now dealing with this, like I said, going back to like the very idea of this article and the fact that how Michelle Goldberg basically describes the epithet of white liberal as being this huge thing. Is there a way that we can have, like what we've been doing a lot on the show is we talk about white people, but we talk about white people, the brand, as opposed to white people themselves, to try to like separate it a bit in language so that they understand, like, clearly, calm down. The white people brand is problematic. All right. Whether or not you as a white person is problematic, let's not have that. Like, we can go into that. We can find out and have a conversation around it. But the white people brand, is there an argument to be made that when people talk about white liberals, which, by the way, I talk about white liberals, is there an argument to be made that language is actually problematic, or is it truly the fact that people need to get over themselves?
I mean, I guess the thing is, if you're one of the problematic ones, then the language is totally appropriate for you. But the thing that I've learned about sort of dealing with white allies and sort of people who understand themselves to be good white folks is that the actual good white folks are generally not offended by this language, right? They check themselves, they hear what you're trying to say, they take what they can, and they keep it moving. The folks who get defensive are the very folks that you're trying to call out. And so my sort of issue with Michelle is white liberal is not being used as a broad epithet against white people. And even if it were, there is no epithet that does the kind of cultural damage that epithets against other racial groups actually does. So it's just a disingenuous argument and a way to say, say, you're trying to make me seem like a bad person. And I don't, and I don't like being called a bad person. And it's like, well, again, this is not about who you are as a person. This is about what kind of actions you support. And in her case, it's about the way that she argued, right? And so trying to say that people of color on Twitter are limiting her freedoms and her ability to free speech and all of these kinds of things, that they're promoting censorship, is completely absurd, right? Part of what has folks upset is that people of color on Twitter are actively exercising their right to freedom of speech. They're making these conversations far more democratic than they've ever been, and they're challenging the grounds upon which white liberals get to come out looking like the sort of racial champions, by holding their feet to the fire and making them be accountable. And so white folks are not used to that. They're uncomfortable with a regime in which they don't have control, absolute power over the narrative of liberalism. And I think that we can call that out. And say that there are actual actors, actual white people, like Michelle Goldberg's rhetoric there, that do this problematic stuff. And at the same time be saying, this is not saying all white people are bad. This is not saying all white liberals are bad. I think most Black folks would acknowledge, particularly those of us in institutions, like I'm an academic, I've had great white liberal allies who have been mentors, who have supported me, who I consider to be good colleagues and friendly to a certain extent. And so we can hold all of those truths and still say the sort of liberal agenda, which is led mostly by white folks, it leaves much to be desired. And we don't have to apologize or capitulate or equivocate, right, about that.
So from now on, whenever you hear these horns, just know you are now entering the blackness. Collard greens, cornbread, and the catfish. Malcolm X and Dr. King with a black fist. We are live, son. This is blackness.